Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. This might sound a bit weird, but only in the last year or so, I discovered the joys of going to the movies. Ask my husband and kids which screen I prefer, and they will roll their eyes and talk about my addiction to watching Star Trek reruns on TV. And they are correct, for the record. Currently, I'm enjoying Captain Catherine Janeway and her crew on board the Starship Voyager finding their way back to the Alpha Quadrant. Again, they make it, of course, every time. There's no surprises, plus there's a happy ending. Some may find this ridiculously boring. Others find it soothing. If you know, you know. But like I said, I have also been going to the movies lately. The last movie I saw, my husband, Corey, who loves movies, suggested it for us. It is a movie about the true story of Mother Cabrini, an Italian immigrant and nun. If ever there was a movie description that would make me go to the movies, this clearly is it. Corey knows me well. And the movie did not disappoint. I can highly recommend it, and I will not give you any spoilers, except for this one important one. There is a happy ending. In real life, Mother Cabrini was a force of nature that simply could not be stopped, not even by the Pope. Sorry, little spoiler there again. Her life really makes for a great story. And we love good stories. In fact, stories are everywhere. Stories we store in books and movies like fairy tales collected by the Grimm brothers, or the imaginative works of Tolkien, or much further back to Homer's Iliad. Humankind and stories go hand in hand. There are so many forms of stories, like the stories of origin, for example, that just fascinate us. We obsess over them. We can now analyze our DNA to find out where our ancestors hailed from. And sometimes the stories of origin told in a family are proven true, and they are Irish, not only on St. Patrick's Day. Other times people are surprised to find out that they are not actually related to King Henry VIII, like great-grandma claimed every Christmas after a cup or two of eggnog. What a plot twist. We love and we live stories. Stories we share with our family at the dinner table about our day. Stories about our family we share with a friend over a steaming hot cup of tea. Stories we share around the campfire. In fact, I can imagine that the safety, the warmth, and light of a campfire is ground zero, is the origin of all stories. Families and tribes gathered around it and told and retold their stories of origin, their stories of survival, and their stories of hope. And, of course, their stories about God. Some of them, now in written form, we heard today at this Easter Vigil. Talk about reruns. There's a reason I like them. And before this service begins, we light a fire, not a campfire. We call it the new fire. Kindling this new fire with flint and stone begins in the darkness. Like the campfire, this new fire is a source of warmth and of light. And of course, it symbolizes the victory of Christ over the darkness of death. By the safety of this light, we heard about the world's loving creation in the origin story of Genesis again. We heard the triumphant story of Exodus, of survival ending in jubilant song and dance. Ezekiel's story of hope assures us that there is no bone too dry, and we can always hope in our life-giving God. Zephaniah tells about the grace and joys of a faithful life. Paul writes about the resurrection story in his letters to the Romans, assuring them of Jesus' defeat over death. All these stories are reassuring. They leave us feel satisfied. They have closure. Every good story has closure, right? Quote, "So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." This is how Mark ends the story. This is how Mark ends the gospel of Jesus Christ. The added ending that you can see is only one of two attempts to provide a more satisfying ending to this gospel much later. It was added in the 4th century. We really, really crave and need closure, it seems. We couldn't bear to have just one gospel end with less than the perfect human happy end. We like our endings tidy, with a nice ribbon around. Closure. So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. These 3 women, Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome, stayed at Jesus' side not only during his ministry, but throughout his passion, throughout his public and humiliating death. They never denied Jesus. They never flinched. These 3 disciples were there when the guards beat Jesus. They witnessed people spitting on him, mocking him, and stripping him naked. Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome did not run when the thorns dug into Jesus' skull and the cross was put on his bleeding back and shoulders to carry to his death. They were present. They held vigil at the cross. They cried as he died slowly and in agony. They knew where Jesus was buried because they were there. Now they make their way to this tomb where they know Jesus is buried. They want to honor their friend and teacher one last time. And for that reason, they bring fragrant spices to anoint him. The fragrance of the spice mixed with oil is in anticipation of a decomposing body. They watched him die. His death is undeniable. They approach his tomb with the heaviest of hearts, steeled for the sacred but painful task ahead. I wonder how long it took I wonder how long it took for the sight to make sense. The stone is moved, the tomb open. How long? How long did these three sisters in faith stand and stare in utter silence before they could move again? What happened? Did someone steal the body of their beloved teacher and friend to deny him dignity, even in death? This is more than they can take. This breaks them. They run frantically inside the tomb, hoping against hope that Jesus' body would be there. And instead, a complete stranger greets them. Dressed in white or not, an unfamiliar face at this time just proves their worst fears have come true. So we must wonder how much of what this nice young man dressed in white says actually gets through to them. He says, "Do not be alarmed, but let's be real. Whoever did actually calm down after the words calm down?" The young man, we can presume him to be an angel, was giving them good news. Jesus is risen. But what does that sound like in the middle of a panicked breakdown? So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. That sounds about right. This is the stark reality of grief, the stark reality of death. It does not sound nice. It does not sound tidy. There is no ribbon, no satisfying end, no closure. Like it or not, this is where the human story ends. Death is the ultimate end. No human, no matter how powerful, escapes it. Death is not only the ultimate end, but it is also the ultimate equalizer. Nothing is as sure, nothing is as final and unknowable to us as death. Of course they were afraid. Of course this is how the story ends. They are human. Of course we know it is not how God's story ends. To God, death, God's own death, instead of being the end, instead of even being an obstacle to overcome, to God, death is a tool. Jesus did not need a throne, an army, or political power. What use would he have of these human and empty symbols of power when he can overcome the cross, the symbol of our ultimate defeat? And not just overcome death, but use it, wield it like a fine instrument to bring about the world's salvation. Only through dying a mortal death could Jesus make the divine resurrection known to us. Only through Jesus' death are we aware of the divine story that God invites and desires for us to live into. Without death, no resurrection. No resurrection, no life, no story beyond our own. Our lives are small and short stories. Maybe we manage a couple of ribbons. Maybe we have tidy little closures along the way. Maybe, if we're very lucky. But they are small, our lives. The stories that we love and live are small and human. The story of our gospel today, with its lack of closure, leaves an opening, invites us into the divine story. Mark acknowledges our human fears, and without taking away from God's story, leaves the ending open for us. What does come after fear? Mark intended to leave this choice up to us. We love and we live stories. Let's risk not having our nice and tidy closure. Afraid or not, let's live into God's never-ending story, into the life and death of Jesus Christ, who is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.